को मोटिवेट करते रहे हैं। उनका जो संदेश रहता है हमेशा ही हमें प्रेरणा देता है और आगे बढ़ने की राह दिखाता है। तो मैं ये चाहूँगा कि ये जो उन्हें समन्वय की बात कही, वो सारे ही टीपीए प्रोफेशनल और यहाँ भी जितने पधारे हुए अदाधिगणी हैं और जितने भी पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं, वो अपने प्रोफेशन में, अपने बिजनेस में, अपने एंटरप्राइज में समन्वय को स्थापित करें, जैसे मुनीषी ने कहा, और निरंतर आगे बढ़े। मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा नवीन जी से कि वो आगे आए। टाइगर, ओके। कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा, हमारे जो नेक्स्ट स्पीकर है वो हमारे बीच आ चुके हैं। सो आई वुड लाइक टू रिक्वेस्ट मिस्टर अरुण वेंकट राव टू प्लीज़ कम ऑन डायस, एंड उनका सम्मान करने के लिए मैं रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहूँगा दिनेश जी धोका, साउथ जोन प्रेसिडेंट, एंड साउथ जोन सेक्रेटरी रक्षिता जी बोरा, वो भी आगे आए। ओम अरम।
He's currently building Wizard. Wizard is a last mile infrastructure company. Wizard operates micro warehouse for e-commerce companies for last mile delivery. Wizard is also building network of dark stores in top cities of India for D2C and FMCG brands to enable instant fulfillment of orders from customers and kiranas. Previously, he was a co-founder of Trucksumo. Trucksumo was the Uber for delivery vans. Under his leadership, Trucksumo scaled from zero to revenue of USD 6 million in last 4 years. Prior to Trucksumo, he was at Google Canada, where he drove the adoption of mobile ad products for top 500 brands in Canada. Before Google, he had worked for 2 ad tech startups across the multiple roles in product management and sales. Arun has master's degree in business from Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. He's an avid reader, poker enthusiast, and amateur badminton player, and is an aspiring writer. We welcome you to the dialogue.
Walk around if that's okay. Thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. The earlier 2 talks were really good, and it's always a Dinesh ji was saying he doesn't want to be the one between you guys and lunch. I'm a little scared of being the guy after lunch because I don't know how many of you will start dozing off in a little while. But anyway, once again, thank you very much. I, throughout my professional career, have been associated with startups, mostly as an early stage employee in the earlier part of my career. In between, there was a phase where I worked with Google across India, Australia, and Canada, but then again came back to startups and did 2 startups of my own. I think one of them took off like a rocket ship and then came down like one. It didn't go anywhere. We were at it for 4 years. That was Trucksumo. With the wisdom that we got from the first startup, we started another logistics startup in 2018 called Wizard. Earlier this year in 2022, we got acquired by Mahindra Group. Apart from Wizard, Trucksumo, and my previous startup experiences, I also invest small check sizes in interesting startups from my college juniors. So I've invested in about 15 startups, mentored them as well, and collectively these startups have raised over $75 million in the last 3 years. One of the things about doing a startup is a lot of it is, the advice falls in 2 buckets. You know, a lot of it is very, very intuitive and people ignore that. They make their life very complicated while running startups. And some of it is very counterintuitive, which nobody tells you, right? So, and in between these 2 buckets is, if you can, you know, pick and choose the right kind of advice from these 2 buckets, is when you will basically take your startup to an exit or to whatever you want to make it to. Could you go to the next slide, please? So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about a bunch of things. As you can see, there are over 7 topics. Let's see how many we can cover. I've tried to cover the nuts and bolts of building a startup, and at the end of the session, we'll obviously take a few questions and see where we lead. And let's start with the idea. I think everybody in this room has a bunch of ideas. You know, you have something that is missing in the world that you feel should be solved, and if it were solved, the world would be a great place, right? And and it is human nature to have ideas, and especially in a very ambitious and ambitious community like yours. Starting a business is par for the course. I'm sure there are a bunch of people here who built and scaled businesses as well. The thing with idea is that ideas by themselves have no value, right? If ideas really had value, people would be selling ideas and making money. If I tell you I have a great idea, I will give it to you for 1 lakh rupees, I don't think anybody in this room will actually come and pay me that money. So ideas by themselves have very little value monetarily. But they have, can you go to the next slide, please? But they're very, very, very important. I'll tell you why. Because once you take an idea and you start building a solution for it, if all goes well, you're going to spend at least 7 to 10 years doing that work. So you better pick the right idea. Because if you pick the wrong idea and then spend 7 years running it, you've almost, wasted more than half a decade chasing the wrong dream, right? And this is something, can you go back please? And this is something that I see with most founders. They usually quit a job because they have an idea in mind, and then they're like, chalo, chalu karna hai. How do I build the product? How do I hire my founding team? How do I raise funding? And when I sit them down and I ask them, Chief, how many months between you quitting your job and, starting this idea? Most of them will be like 2 months. Sometimes I even heard 2 weeks. And I'm like, you're going to do this for 10 years of your life. And you're going to decide what to do for the next 10 years of your life in 2 weeks. And the reason is that feeling that agar main nahi karunga to koi aur karke chala jayega. But in 10 years, a month, 2 months, a year, 2 years, even if you spend 2 years identifying ideas and discarding ideas, it's not a bad thing. Because you're playing a very, very long game when you're building a startup. So the pick, if you can go to the next slide, please. So why this idea is super important. And Josh Kappelman is one of the most celebrated seed investors in the world. And he says, same thing. The typical founder spends all their time picking an idea, starting a company, scaling a company. They spend less than 5% of their time in idea selection. It's okay for investors to spend very little time on idea selection because they're investing in 30 ideas. You get one shot while you're building a startup, right? So be very, very careful about the idea that you're picking, right? And what are some of the rules of thumb that you can use while you're picking this? Can you go to the next slide, please? Most founders are optimistic by nature, right? They believe that everyone knows the statistics, 9 out of 10 startups fail. But then why do people go ahead and build startups? Because they're optimistic by nature. Founders have to be irrationally optimistic, otherwise new companies would never get created. But one of the places where that's a disadvantage, where your optimism is a disadvantage, is when you're evaluating an idea. Most of us look for confirmatory evidence. We are like, ye main build kar raha hu. Is there somebody who wants it? You go looking for people who want it. You go looking for people to say, "Are tu sahi kar raha hai," because it feels good, right? When somebody says you're on the right track, we get a dopamine rush and we're like, "Huh, leaving that great job in EY was a great idea because some 10 people are telling me that this is the right thing to do." But as a founder, if you want your ideas to stand the test of time, you should look for disconfirming evidence. You should look for reasons why your idea will not work. And there are 2 very good advantages to it. If you find good, strong reasons why your idea will not work, you will discard it immediately and move on to the next idea. Right? It cuts down time wasted in chasing the wrong ideas. Secondly, let's say you find a bunch of things why your idea will not work. Now you have 2 decisions to make. Are these reasons solvable? With my talent, with the technology that is available in the world, with the technology that I can build, can these reasons be solved, or can these reasons be not solved? If they cannot be solved, done. Discard that idea, move on to the next one. But if they can be solved, now you're onto something. because you are at a unique place where you've identified an idea, looked at why it may not work, and then you've identified solutions about how to make it work. So that's always a better approach to look for disconfirming evidence rather than confirming evidence. Right? So that is the why not. Why should I not do this idea? Or why hasn't it not been done yet? Can you go to the next? And why now? There is a very good reason. I mean, and why now is probably what a lot of us call luck. You know, what we call, arey, wo banda right place, right time mein tha. Right place, right time can be hacked if you pay a little bit more attention as to why now. A lot of problems in a lot of industries are unsolvable for a very long period of time. But suddenly, because of either government regulation, because of leaps in technology, or because of any other reason, suddenly they become solvable. For example, you know, it was for a machine to identify a blocked nerve in your eye was almost impossible. You would get like 30%, 40%, 50% accuracy. But today, with the computing power of GPUs and the amount of training data that is available in the world, a 19-year programmer can write code where, you know, it can sift through millions of images and then tell you whether there is a blockage in your optic nerve. So things like this that were previously unsolvable, either because of constraints of physics or because of constraints of regulation, suddenly become solvable. So be sure that you're solving it at the right time. You know, I'm sure nobody in this room would go and start a cab company, or they wouldn't start a delivery company. Why? Because that is solved. It's already highly competitive. There are established players, monopolies established. Similarly, you also don't want to be the guy who's banging his head against an unsolvable problem because aap mein keeda hai. Right? So don't be a irrational fool. At the same time, don't be an irrational optimist as well. Right? So that is the why now part. Moving on. Could you go to the next slide? And this is again a fairly important question when deciding on the idea. Why you? Why are you uniquely placed to solve this particular idea? What are the unique strengths that you have? What do you know about this idea that 9 out of 10 people will not understand or will not comprehend? When you can find an idea that really speaks to you in that manner, where you are the very unique person that can solve this, you will leave your competition behind. The problem that I see is, I see salespeople trying to build AI ML companies. You will get crushed. There are people who've done 20 years of programming who are building AI ML companies, and you want to just go and build it's not going to happen. Similarly, there are technologists who are trying to build sales companies. It will not happen. There's a very small chance that you will be successful. So if you can take an idea that is very uniquely suited to your skills, that is uniquely suited to your worldview, you have that much better of a chance of getting to where you want to get, right? So that's what the idea, the pick. Spend a lot of time. If you're planning to start up, spend time. It doesn't matter if it's a week, if it's a month, it can even be a year, right? So that's the part on idea. I'll just pause here and go to the next slide, please. Next comes the founding team. The second question that most non-technical people who are starting out ask me is, where can I find a technical co-founder? Where do I find a programmer? मेरे को ये आइडिया है, बट ये प्रोडक्ट बनाने के लिए मुझे बंदा कहाँ मिलेगा? And the unfortunate answer, if you go to can you go to the next slide, please? The unfortunate answer is that good co-founders are extremely rare, and they're extremely unique to you. And a good co-founder has intelligence, energy, and integrity. And this is a very, very, it's a very deceptive statement. You know why? Because people who have a lot of intelligence are usually very lazy. Because they can, what takes other people, let's say 4 to 5 hours, it takes them 2 hours. And the remaining 2 hours, they want to chill. They want to look at the world go by. They want to sleep. Right? So intelligent and high energy is almost a very difficult combination. You'll find very few people who will have high intelligence. You'll notice that the most smartest guy in your class would have been the guy who is the most laid back. Right? And couple that with integrity, it's almost like finding a unicorn, to use startup language. Second, somebody who has very low ego with you. Right? Next, can you go to the next one? Next, please. And a co-founder should ideally be someone you don't mind reporting to. More often than not, I see co-founders saying, I want my co-founders to report to me, but I don't want to report to them. So that power imbalance itself is, the fourth one is not a cynic or a pessimist. There is this line in the army. They say lead, follow, or get out of the way. A cynic will not do any of this. He'll be like, "Arey, ye kaam nahi karega. This is the reason it won't work. This is why we shouldn't be doing it. I have a better idea." They will neither lead, they will neither follow, neither will they get out of the way. And they'll make your life hell. So do not partner with cynics or pessimists just because they're good at their job. Right? You need really optimistic people who are like, ho jayega, kar lenge. That is the attitude you will. And the final one is, you will not meet your co-founder at a conference. And if you meet your co-founder at a conference, run in the other direction. It's not going to work. Because finding a co-founder and working 10 years with them in a no ego, low ego environment where you're going to have hundreds of fights is almost like a marriage. Right? So if it's going to be a marriage and I think I'd be embarrassed to walk into any room and say, I've met my wife at a conference. Right? I mean, there's something wrong there. I'm sorry if there are people who've met their wives in a conference. This is meant to drive home a point, not to pass judgment. So, and the fun fact is, and I've seen this across at least 20 to 30 startups that I've worked with, the biggest reason why startups don't work is co-founder conflict. Person A wants to push a startup in this direction, co-founder wants to push it in this direction, they cannot agree, startup fails. Startup first gets paralyzed, then team leaves, then all the jokers in the startup stay, then the startup dies. That's what happens. So when you're choosing a co-founder, be extremely careful about who you're partnering with. It's okay to go at it solo rather than do it with a wrong co-founder. Right? The reason, and this falls under the extremely obvious but often gotten wrong category. Because of the same thing, you want to get started. अरे कोई techie नहीं मिल रहा है. अरे ये मिल गया. चलो इसके साथ कर लेंगे. And then you end up failing. You realize that after three years, that this is not a marriage that you want to be a part of. So get this right. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide, please? The third is a market, and I think a lot has been written about market, so I won't give my own funda on this. If you can go to the next slide, just stay here. A lot of people discuss what determines a startup success. Is it the people? Is it the founding team? Is it the product? You know, I have this beautiful app that does all these amazing things. I press a button, balloons are erupt out of everywhere. Or is it the market? And it's been proven time and again. And there is a beautiful quote by Warren Buffett that goes on the lines of, when a phenomenal team meets a lousy market, it's the reputation of the market that stays intact, right? So can you go to the next slide, please? And this has been written by Mark Anderson, who's the founder of Netscape and A16Z. A16Z is one of the best VC firms in the world. And he says this, in a great market where people want your solution, the market will pull the product out of you. If you can make a basic working prototype that your customers can use that solves their problem, they will pay you money, they will use it, they will pull the product out of your startup even if you don't have a really good team or a product. All you need to do is make sure that your product solves the problem of the market. Barely. But you can have like the best of team and the best of product, and you can and you can be in a shitty market, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen because the market will keep rejecting you. It will buy once in a while. That will make you feel that there is a market. You'll spend more time, then they will not buy, then you'll not understand. It's a mess when you pick the wrong market. Right? So when you're trying to get your startup to work, we talked about idea, we talked about the founding team. More important than these two is the market. I think it is the most important thing. Getting that market right and the need assessment right. If you do that, I think your startup journey, I'm not saying that it will all be rainbows and roses, but it will be a far more smoother journey than other startups. Can we move on to the next slide? And there is this term that is coined by Mark Anderson called product market fit. Can we load the content on this? Yeah, please. Next. Yeah, it's the same thing. When a great team meets a lousy market, market wins. When a lousy team meets a great market, market wins. When a great team meets a great market, something magical happens. And you want to be where the magic happens. Right? And you can know very quickly once you do a startup whether you have product market fit or you don't. Because when you have product market fit, people who use your product will call you and say, "Bhai, mujhe aur ye do feature chahiye, and we are using it in Hyderabad, but my team in Bangalore also wants your product, and I have set up a meeting with the VP of operations to take your product pan-India." That is product market fit, where the market is like dragging it out of you, right? When you don't have product market fit, you're going and saying, "Bhai, use kar lo na, kyun nahi use kar rahe ho, kya problem hai?" And that guy will say, "Thoda busy hu, next week se use kar lunga." That is the lack of product market fit. And you will know. And when you know, pivot, change, move on to the next thing, change your idea, change your product. Redo your whole needs assessment. Go back to the drawing board. Don't sit there, spend 3 more years and say, world is an unfair place. You got the signal very early. You just didn't pay attention to it. Right? That's on the market. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next comes funding. I think this is, the most interesting part for everyone, because everyone I mentor a bunch of young entrepreneurs, both from my undergrad and from my B school. The first question that they ask is, how do I raise funding? Nobody starts off by saying, do you think my idea is fundable? They're like, it's obvious that I'm bound to succeed, but how do I raise? If only I had money, I'd like rule the world. But when you look at funding, this is how it looks like. And this is in the US in a study that was done of about 1,100 startups that raised seed funding. Less than half of it raised the next round. Can you imagine? You raise one round of funding and you feel like, and it happened to us in our first startup. We raised a 1.5 million seed round on a paper napkin. The investor was in front of us. We wrote it out on a whiteboard. He said, "Okay, I'm going to lead this round." And 7 days later, we had 1.5 million in the bank. And what happened? We couldn't raise the second round. It's extremely common for companies to die. You might think that this is the age of startups. If I do a startup, I will raise money. It's not true. That's because you don't hear of more than 50% of the cases that never made it to the second round. And when you keep going further down the funnel, third round, fourth round, fifth round, it's 3%. 3% of startups go on to raise a Series D. For you, it might look like 100 startups that are coming on Money Control, Times of India, etc., etc. But there are, behind the scenes, there are another 10,000 startups that you've never even heard of, that had good teams, wrong market, good teams, founder fought with each other, good teams, bad idea, great idea, bad teams, all sorts of combinations. So, don't mistake funding that you've made it, right? If you get the earlier three things right, which is the idea, the team, and the market right, I think funding will follow, but still that doesn't mean you will succeed. Moving on. Let's understand, I often get this question. These VCs must be idiots. They're funding companies that are losing thousands of crores every year. Why do they do that? If they gave me that money, I will build a very profitable business of 500 crores. Why are they not doing that? Why do they not fund my business, but why do they fund a Swiggy that loses 3,000 crores per annum? That's because VCs fund, a VC fund works very, very differently. It's not your traditional PMS, a portfolio management service, or a private equity firm. This is how they work. They typically, let's take a fund of around 100 million. The tenure of a fund is usually 10 years. And the people who give money to a VC fund expect a return of around 12 to 15% IRR, typically. Right? So if you look at what the exit value of the fund should be, it should be 3 times that. So if you raise 100 million fund, you're an okay-ish, decently performing fund if you return 300 million back to the people who gave you the money, right? Can you go to the next? Yeah, just stay here. Now let's take an example of a VC fund that chooses 10 startups and invests 10 million in each. So you've deployed your 100 million, right? Now, and you take initial valuation is about 30% or $30 million. Now you put in $10 million. So you have 25% of the company across 10 companies. Now, if you go to the next slide, here is what happens in the startup world. 5 of those 10 companies will go to zero. You will lose money. The VC fund will lose money. They will never get their money back. They gave 10 million. They got zipped nada after whatever time. Then there will be 2 companies that they put in 10 million and they'll get back 10 million. That's it. And then there'll be 1 or 2 companies where they'll put in 10 million and they'll probably get a 2x, 3x return in 10 years. 30 million vapas aayega. But there'll be 1 company which will do like a 220 x, 22x of the money they put in. That doesn't mean a VC goes and says, I will find 5 companies that are idiotic, 2 companies that are average, 2 companies that are good, and 1 company that is extraordinary. No. VCs are always looking for extraordinary companies. When I say extraordinary, they don't measure it by profits, they don't measure it by EBITDA. They say that if this startup clicks, can it be a huge company? Can it be a dominant player? Will it be a monopoly? Can I change prices and will people still stick? So VCs are always looking for companies with those kind of characteristics. It's the nature of their business that 5 of those companies fail. 2 of them return the money, 2 of them get an average outcome, and 1 of them becomes like a spectacular success. So for a VC, he doesn't care if you run a small profitable business. If you say, give me 10 million, I will give you 20 million in 3 years, he'll say, no, I don't want it. I want a company that is growing. If you go to the next slide. So basically, yeah, here. What does a VC want? He wants something with a large market. He doesn't want a 50, 60 crore company. He wants a big company in a large market, tens of billions of dollars. That should be the market size. They want ambitious founders. They don't want people who want to protect downsides. Arey loss aa raha hai, main loss ko. No. They want founders who will dominate markets. They want founders who will crush competition, who will invent categories, who don't sleep, who have a proven track record. And they want businesses that are growing anywhere between 200% to 1000% year over year. Those are the companies they want to fund because they know they are in the business of funding risk. The question they ask is not, how do I protect my downside risk? The questions that VCs ask themselves is, how big can it be if I'm right? I'm taking a crazy bet. How big can this company become if I am right. And they're okay to be wrong 9 out of 10 times. You've seen that. They're okay to be wrong 9 out of 10 times, but they want to be spectacularly right that one time. So when you think about why is, instead of flipping the question saying that why is a VC not funding my business, a better question to say is my business VC fundable? Does it address a large market of billions of dollars? You know, can I dominate this market? Can I grow at 300, 400% year over year? Is it defensible once I come in? Can I hold off competition and keep growing? Can I grow faster than the category? Next slide, please. So those are the, sorry, could you go back to that? So those are the questions that you need to ask. And if your idea has these characteristics, you are a perfect candidate for VC funding. Otherwise, the next slide answers your question. This. Motorcycles are common. Jet planes are rare. VCs sell jet fuel. And if a VC is foolish enough to put jet fuel in a motorcycle, it will end in an accident. Right? And if a motorcycle owner thinks he can fly and takes jet fuel, it will end in an accident. So if you're building a jet plane, go for a VC. If you're not building a jet plane, there are other sources of funding that you can look into. Friends, family, savings, debt, father-in-law. Yeah. So those are the, so there is an alternative. I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. I think we all get caught up in the frenzy that, अरे ये startup ने इतना पैसा उठा लिया, वो startup ने उतना पैसा उठा लिया, मैं भी एक चालू कर दूंगा, मैं भी फंडिंग उठा लूंगा. It's not that. शायद तुम उठा लोगे, but it might end up being raising money for a wrong idea. So be sure about what you're raising for and whether it's the right kind of fuel for your vehicle. Right? Moving on. Next is unit economics. So if VCs are not idiots, why are they okay giving money to companies that lose money? Right? Why are they cutting these hundreds of millions of dollars and giving it to companies that are losing so much money? Because there are three kinds of burn, right? When you're burning money, there is a good way to burn money. Yes, there is. I will come to that. And then there is a bad way to burn money. And VCs want to fund the good way to burn money. And I'll show you what the bad is before I talk to you about the good. Let's take an example of an average revenue per order of, this is a company that sells some widgets. Average revenue per order is 100. The life of a customer is 1. Orders per year are 4. Lifetime value is 400. And they spend 500 rupees to acquire a customer whose lifetime value is 400. That's the idea of an ugly kind of burn, where as you're adding customers, you're losing more and more money, right? That company will, it's only a matter of time before that company dies. So if they are this kind of a company, they should at least try to be a bad company, bad burn company. What is a bad burn? Your lifetime value is higher than customer acquisition cost, but if you add all the variable costs, the COGS and other variable costs, suddenly you're negative. Even that's not a great place to be, right? But in this, at least you have some options. You can try and get your customer to buy more orders. You can try and increase the life of a customer by investing in your fixed costs. There are some levers you have to play with, right? So VCs might still fund this company. Can you go to the next slide? This is a VC's dream company, right? Where they're still losing money. If you see, they're losing around $60,000 a year or a month, however you want to take it. But they're burning it on the right things. Till the operating margin, which is your customer acquisition costs, which is your COGS, which is your variable cost. If you take all of that, they're still positive, which is the operating margin. VCs love these companies. They don't care if you're losing money as a whole, but if you're making money on a unit level, they love you. That is why you will hear a Deepinder Goyal of Zomato saying that on every order we make money. But next day his annual statement comes and you're like, यार कल तो बोल रहा था पैसे बना रहा है, यहाँ पे तो 3,000 करोड़ का लॉस है, क्या चल रहा है? They're okay funding that because that 3,000 crore is coming from the fixed cost. Or a large portion of it is coming from the fixed cost. Basically what they're saying is, over a period of time, the transactions will increase and our fixed costs will also get covered because we make money on every transaction. Right? This is a VC's dream company. So the reason I'm talking to you about all of this is it helps to know how to present to a VC. Right? It helps to know when you go to a VC, if you can show you're making money at an operating margin and you operate in a large market and you can dominate that market and you can grow at 300%, he will write you a check the next day. Anyhow, moving on. This is about why not to do a startup, right? I'll tell you, why not to do a startup. The psychological toll that startups take on you over a period of 10 years, 7 years, 10 years, that I have cried like tears, and I know founders who've cried tears, even though things are going well, because things are not going well enough. A customer will give you a big order today and you'll be like extremely happy, you'll go celebrate. 2 days later, he'll come back and say, hey, my VP asked me to hold off that order. Everything that will go wrong will go wrong. One day you'll feel like you're king of the world, the other day you'll feel like you're a worthless piece of ... So you should have the temperament to manage those manic positives and manic negatives. Can you go to the next startup? There's this beautiful article called The Struggle. It's been written by another partner of, and this is what he says. He says, because a startup means that you have to go through the struggle. And he says, the struggle is when you wonder why you started the company. Struggle is when people ask you why you don't quit and you don't know the answer. The struggle is when you think your employees are lying and you think they're right. And the struggle is when food loses its taste. The struggle is when you believe you shouldn't be the CEO of the company. The struggle is when self-doubt becomes self-hatred. I'm not trying to dissuade you, but unless there is an extremely strong reason, unless the startup is calling out to you, don't do it. There is a fair chance that after this startup, I will not do another one. And I'm not saying, and I know a lot of people who tell me the same thing, saying I'm done. I cannot do this again. Right? So can we go to the next one? Yeah, more on the struggle. The struggle is when you go on a vacation and feel better and you feel worse. Yeah, it's some days you'll just feel like you're chewing on glass. It just feels like that. And you should be okay with that. If you have that temperament, go ahead and do it. Right? But there are extremely good reasons to do a startup as well, which is the next slide. I'm not... the opportunity to control your own destiny, right? All of us have felt that I could do this better. I could run a team better. I could run a division better. I could build a better culture. I can run a budget better than what my company does or what my manager does. So a startup gives you the opportunity to say, clean slate, brother or sister. Do whatever you want to. It's in your hands. Right? And a startup gives you the opportunity to create something that never existed before. You've changed the world in your own small way. And it gives you an opportunity to make the world a better place. I know people laugh at that quote, but it does, right? You're solving somebody's problem. People are having jobs because of you. You're taking some pain away from people's lives, either in a business or in their personal lives. And the fourth one, which I think is very, very exciting, is, you know, a lot of us think that I will never be like my manager or I will never be like this. So this gives you the opportunity to craft a culture that is true to who you are, that is true to your own values, that is true to your own philosophy, right? And the final one is it's an opportunity to create wealth for yourself. I mean, we've been very blessed that, you know, after years of struggle, we got acquired. And the joy that my team members felt when they got to know that they could afford a home, they could send their parents on an international vacation, they could buy that car that they always wanted, or they could put that down payment on a house that it's amazing. It's extremely fulfilling. And wealth for yourself as well. And wealth, I think most of you in this room are smart enough to understand. Wealth, I don't think people want wealth, money for the sake of wealth. People want wealth because it gives you freedom. Right? It gives you freedom from anxiety. It gives you freedom from being on somebody's beck and call. It gives you freedom to design your life in a way that you want. And startups give that opportunity, no doubt about that. And that's pretty much the end of this talk. I'm open to questions. I'm open to talk to you guys one-on-one as well if you have anything that you want to run by me. But thank you for this opportunity. And I sincerely hope that everyone in this room gets to pursue their dreams, because it's as painful as it is on some days, it is equally magical on other days. So good luck, everyone.
So Arun, just to mention, we wanted to give a loud applause. We wanted to give a loud applause, but we don't clap in this. That's why we are saying Om Aram.
Got it. No worries. I mean,
so you would be wondering why they are not clapping or something.
No, not at all. That's totally cool.
How do you see the startups in agro-based food? I mean, the culture has started in coming 10 years.
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in the agri services space, but being in logistics, we get like an adjacent view of what's happening in agri. And there are some very interesting things, right? If you look at one big theme in agri is the disintermediation of the broker. You know, where farmers get a better price for their yields, and a bunch of startups are trying to crack that problem. Then there is another fintech play, which is that how do I increase access to inputs, better seeds, better information, better crop growing techniques. There are a bunch of companies that are, I think, like Mr. Devender said, we're on the cusp of an agri revolution. I think what is happening is a lot of people who are traditionally agriculturalists are moving to urban areas and becoming labor. And in some ways, the need for technology, automation, newer business models, newer financing models are creating a bunch of startups. And I think we will see a very different agricultural landscape in India, I think, in the next 10 years, for sure.
National logistics policy was announced. National logistics policy was announced by the PM. How do you feel it will, how startup will have the more efficient in that way to how this policy to move further?
It's a little embarrassing. I still haven't checked out what they have released. I know it came yesterday. It came on 17th. I think yesterday was Driver's Day or something, and PM Modi announced a new logistics policy. I'm sorry. I'll have to plead ignorance on this. I'm really sorry.
Last mile logistics is what I think you specialize into. Is the dark stores actually the future of e-commerce? I mean, everybody's trying to move in that direction. Not only the groceries of the world and the cloud kitchen, but even the normal e-commerce also get moving that side. So is that the future, or are we, looking into some other direction?
So that's the future in some ways that we are betting on. That a lot of things will come to you, and a lot of things will come to your doorstep sooner. Right? Especially with Zepto, Swiggy, Instamart, Blinkit, and a bunch of Dunzo. Things come to your doorstep, and earlier things used to come to your doorstep in days, right? I think I've been using e-commerce since 2006, 2007. You'd order on India Plaza, it would come to you 10 days later. Then came Amazon, Flipkart, then you'd get it 4 days later. Then Prime happened in India, you'd get it next day. Today it's not even next day, it's 15 minutes. And we get angry कि मेरा chips and coke 15 minutes में नहीं आया, 30 minutes ले रहा है, ये क्या चल रहा है? Right? So the customer expectations are moving so fast, especially in terms of what will come to my doorstep and how soon it will come, that last mile logistics will be extremely relevant and extremely, it will see a lot of innovative models come up. So, and that's the future we are betting on as well.
So do you compete with companies like Grow Simply? I think they're also into the dark stores. Grow Simply. There's a company called Grow Simply in Bangalore.
Okay.
They're also onto this similar last mile logistics, dark stores plus courier service.
Got it. So our, if you don't mind, can you switch this off? Because I'm not able to hear anything. So we are very clear that we don't want to be a gold digger in a gold rush. We want to sell picks and shovels. Swiggy wants to build dark stores. We are happy to operate. Swiggy wants dark stores. We are happy to operate and run it for them. Dunzo wants it. We are happy to do it. Blinkit wants it. We are happy to do it. But we will never become I will acquire customers and I will help them buy groceries faster. So we will always be a logistics player, a 3PL player, but we will help companies like Swiggy, Zomato, etc. accelerate this trend of instant delivery.
Thank you.
Is that all? It's not about, I think it's not that they are unstructured. See, if you're unstructured, you're going to suffer, period. If not today, you'll suffer later in your journey. It's not about structure or unstructured. See, there are two kinds of, the two kinds of luck, right? You can mix a bunch of things and hope that something magical happens. Then you're working on momentum and energy. Then there is the kind of founder who is very deliberate, who will say, yaar, aisa to nahi ki this industry has existed for, let's say, 100 years. Why has this not been solved? Very few people ask that question. They'll come and say, you know, there is this industry, there is this problem. Let's take logistics itself. So many startups came and said, I will remove even in agri startups that we were talking, they came and said, I will remove the broker and I will become a digital broker. But none of those companies paused and said, 100 saal se ek broker, why is he an integral part of our logistics ecosystem? Why is he existing? If he could have been removed, he would have been removed earlier, right? Somebody would have tried to disintermediate him. Why did nobody do that? So that deliberate thing of trying to question why hasn't this not happened before? And why is now the right time? And do I have the solutions for it? Is the right way to go about it. This thing of मैं 10 चीजें try करूँगा एक click हो जाएगा is you're basically, you know, it's like you are playing the VC game with your time. You're basically saying I'll take 10 bets, hopefully one of them will click. You know what will happen? All 10 of them will either become, 3 or 4 of them might become average, exactly what happened. And you might not hit that home run that you're looking for. So be very deliberate, especially idea, co-founder, market. Spend a year, it's okay. You're going to do this for 7 to 10 years. What is 1 year? 14% worst case, 10% worst case. Nothing compared to the whole journey. Hi. Sure.
Thanks first of all, you've taken us your, a peek into your career at least. So I had one relatively silly question and another one that I value a lot. First one is, what according to you is a good number for co-founders? So I've interacted with multiple people and I've seen two according to your experience is a decent number. That's first question. The second question, of course, startups is about culture. Can't stress enough, right? We've worked on culture so much. But then, according to you, do you think we are overdoing the culture bit a little bit these days? That's the two questions I have. Thanks.
So I'll answer that with the first question with a slight bit of mathematics, right? If you take two people, you have one relationship. If you take three people, it becomes three relationships. If it becomes four people, four co-founders, it becomes six relationships. So the number of relationships that have to work as you keep adding co-founders is following more of a power law, right? It's whatever, if n is the number of founders, nc2 is the number of relationships. So ideally, you should have 2 to 3, I think, is the sweet spot. I'll tell you why. 2, because usually one is a builder and one is a seller. And in cases where there is a significant technology angle, there is one technical builder, one operational builder, and one seller. That more or less is a decent enough recipe. The moment you start making 4, 5, you can't even really, how do you even divide the responsibilities, right? So it becomes that much more, and that many more opinions and all that. So that is, I don't know if I answered your question, but that is how I think. Coming to culture, I think a lot of us start out because we are deeply dissatisfied with our jobs. And a large part of our dissatisfaction comes from two things, right? Manager, culture. Right? And what is culture? Culture is the set of values, set of principles that govern your organization. Another way to look at it is, what behaviors do your employees exhibit when you're not there in the room? That is culture. So, the culture bit is not overdone. I think it's extremely important. Startups that are very deliberate about their culture end up having a longevity that startups that are not deliberate about their culture. Because you know what happens? You create ambassadors. The guys below you, when the new crop of recruits come in, saying that, hey, that's not how we do it. You know, we live by these values. Because you can't go to 20 new recruits and tell them what your company stands for, right? But if you build a good culture, the guys who report to you will make sure that the guys who report to them follow the same ideals. It gets diluted for sure, but it's not overdone. You need to be extremely deliberate with culture is my submission. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
I think in such a simple language, you demystified so many myths about startup. I think your explanations were pretty simple, and I'm sure our audiences really loved all the ideas, and I'm sure it will help them in their career in some way. Now I request Naveenji Surana from the national team, Shushilji Sancheti from Sabha, and Sunilji Pagaria from the host team, Pankajji Sancheti from the host team, to just present a memento to our esteemed speaker.
यही बने रहें। और मीनवाइल जब तक सेटअप हो रहा है हमारे नेक्स्ट सेशन का, आज हमारे बीच में एक और वेरी गुड सिंगर फ्रॉम आवर धर्म संघ, सुधाजी जैन, तो मैं चाहूँगा कि वो आए और तब तक एक अपना गीत प्रस्तुत करें।
जय जिनेंद्र, हाउस द जोश? Okay, so I'll quickly try. कुछ पाने की हो आस आस, कोई अरमा हो जो खास खास आशा है, हर कोशिश में हो वार वार कर दरियाओं को आर पार आशा है, तूफानों को चीर के मंजिलों को छीन ले मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी। आई रिक्वेस्ट यू कि अगर आपको आता है तो प्लीज ज्वाइन, लाइक दिस इज फॉर यू ओनली, मोटिवेशनल सॉन्ग्स में भी। यारों जी भर के जीले पर लगता है आजकल दौर अपना आएगा। यारों जो खुद पे हो यकीन तो जिंदगी हंसी मुझे कल बुलाएगा। यारों जो खुद पे हो यकीन लगता है आजकल दौर अपना आएगा। यारों जो खुद पे हो यकीन तो जिंदगी हंसी तुझे कल बुलाएगा। है जुनून, है जुनून सा जीने में, है जुनून, है जुनून सा सीने में। कहीं जैसे कोई धुन बजे, राहों में देखो है मंजर सजे सारे हमें, हम जहाँ में हर जगह सपने सजाने की हमको मिली वजह। ये अगर जो सच नहीं तो सच भला है क्या। यारों अनजानों की फिक्र ना करती ये उम्र, फिर क्यों भला डरो। है जुनून, है जुनून सा जीने में, है जुनून, है जुनून सा सीने में। थैंक यू। उससे पहले देन आई विल रिक्वेस्ट यू कि 5 नवकार मंत्र पढ़ेंगे। लाइक दिस आई विल बी डेडिकेटिंग टू माई ग्रैंड मदर. She has passed away today, so I am not maybe singing so much great today, but yeah, I'll try. So I'll get my diary. क्या लेकर तू आया जगत में, क्या लेकर तू जाएगा, सोच समझ ले रे बंदे, नहीं आखिर में पछताएगा, आखिर में पछताएगा। बचपन बीता इन गलियों में, यौवन भी रंग रलियों में, खूब सजाया तूने तन को फूलों और कभी कलियों से। देख बुढ़ापा क्यों घबराए, देख बुढ़ापा क्यों घबराए, यह तो एक दिन आएगा, सोच समझ ले रे बंदे, नहीं आखिर में पछताएगा, आखिर में पछताएगा। जीवन भर तो गद्दे तकिए, अंत लकड़ियां सीढ़ी की, अपनी खुद की चिंता कर ले, छोड़ 7वीं पीढ़ी की। बांध के मुट्ठी आया जगत में, बांध के मुट्ठी आया जगत में, हाथ पसारे जाएगा, सोच समझ ले रे बंदे, नहीं आखिर में पछताएगा, आखिर में पछताएगा। भाई बंधु कुटुंब कबीला मरघट तक सब जाएंगे, स्वार्थ के 2 आंसू रोकर लौट लौट घर आएंगे। कोई न आया संग तुम्हारे, कोई न आया संग तुम्हारे, कोई न संग में जाएगा, सोच समझ ले रे बंदे, नहीं आखिर तू पछताएगा, आखिर तू पछताएगा। स्वार्थ की ये अंधी दुनिया सुख में साथ निभाती है, जब पड़ती दुखों की छाया छूमंतर हो जाती है। भिक्षु प्रभु का ध्यान धरो तुम, वो ही तो संग में जाएगा। सोच समझ ले रे बंदे, नहीं आखिर तू पछताएगा, आखिर तू पछताएगा। श्रवण भगवान महावीर स्वामी की, क्रांतिकारी वीर भिक्षु की, गणाधिपति पूज्य गुरुदेवाचार्य श्री तुलसी की, प्रेक्षा प्रणेता आचार्य श्री महाप्रज्ञ जी की, महातपस्वी आचार्य श्री महाश्रमण जी की। जय जय ज्योति चरण। ओम अरहम।
आई थिंक अब मैं पूछ सकता हूँ, हाउस द जोश? थैंक यू सुधा जी फॉर सेटिंग द टेम्पो फॉर आवर नेक्स्ट सेशन।